episode of Deals and Deadlines. That's Hadley. He's the super agent to the stars. I'm Matt, just kind of keeping the ship
You're just
from
a
sinking.
super person.
Well, thank you, Hadley. That's very kind of you. The show is Deals and Deadlines. We are available to you all wherever it is you get your favorite podcast. Just search Deals and Deadlines, and this will be waiting for you if you subscribe in your podcast feed. We're also available on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. All right, Hadley, busy show today. We're going to talk to Andrew Brandt, former vice president of the Green Bay Packers. He was also on the agent side, so he's kind of worked both sides of the fence, negotiating for the player, for the team, so we'll pick his brain about all of that coming up. Let's start with the news out of Dallas, and there's a lot out of Dallas. As Mike McCarthy, the head coach of the Cowboys, was let go. Now all the rumors have begun, including Coach Prime, Deion Sanders rumors.
Shocker, right?
Right, that Jerry Jones and Deion have had some discussion about the job. So let's start there. Do you think it's just discussion? Hey, it helps your brand, it helps my brand. The way I'm reading this, Jordan Schultz and some others think there might be some legs here.
Yeah, let's back up first of all. If you recall what happened last week before Mike McCarthy got let go, he was blocked from interviewing with the Bears, which was very interesting, knowing that obviously he was going to be let go. So I'm not sure how those dynamics happened, but very interesting on how Jerry Jones handled it. Now, what happens with the Cowboys? You know, people used to say it was the job everyone wanted. And I'm not so sure that's the case anymore. I mean, Jerry is, you know, for all intents and purposes, a helicopter parent. And he has the right to do that. I mean, it's his team. But I think there are people out there that are concerned about, you know, the direction the team is going in, where the money has been spent. Mm-hmm. There's not a true GM other than his son, Steven. So I think there's a lot more issues there. With regard to Deion, it would be very interesting. I think that, you know, he's happy in Colorado, done a lot of wonderful things. It'll be interesting to see how he does if he stays at Colorado without his son and without Travis Hunter. But, you know, it'll be interesting to see if it's just all talk. Is it just kind of getting feelers out there, or is there something real to it? Well, I'm not so sure we know any of this yet.
Let me ask you a couple of parts of this. So from a cost standpoint, there's an $8 million buyout for Deion, which to Jerry, whatever, not
Correct.
a huge deal. Deion's making just under $6 million in salary. So the buyout becomes part of it. What would the Dallas Cowboy head coach make typically, like a Mike McCarthy? And then what would Deion make? Because, again, this would be a brand play as much as it would be a head coach play.
I'm not so sure they're concerned about the brand play. I mean, listen, at the end of the day, Jerry has to win. So the excitement that would be there, I don't think the fans can care less. They want to win. They want to get to the playoffs. They want to advance in the playoffs. The buyout stuff, if Jerry Jones wants Deion, or anybody for that matter, is irrelevant. His salary, he'll pay whatever he could pay to make it work. I just am not sure that, you know, Deion is a proven head coach. I mean, no one really knows what he can do. What did he really do at Colorado other than create a lot of hype? Mm-hmm. Yes, they had some victories that they didn't have in the past.
They won 9 games in year 2 at a place they hadn't won a bunch of games.
But he's got 2 top 5 picks in that too. So you've got to see what he can do. I used to always joke that, you know, when I coached youth football, my son was the star of the league. I won. Mm-hmm. Well, what kind of coach am I really if I didn't have that star that I kind of know and I can bring home and do that stuff?
Keep in mind, he got the number 1 quarterback recruit in the nation again. Yeah. Now, it's a fair point to have some doubts. I don't think I doubt Deion anymore. Here's why. I think Deion knows who he is. In other words, he went to Colorado, brought in Pat Shurmur. He's like, Pat, you're the head coach of offense. I'm going to be here. I'm marketing this. I'm recruiting. I'm going to do whatever. I think if he went to Dallas, the plan would have to be, I'm bringing in 2 veteran coordinators who have been around for a long time that I trust to run this. And yes, Deion would be the face. I also think he could probably, when I compare him to other head coaches, handle some of the day-to-day. And here's what I mean. You said, well, what would he do? I'm in Atlanta. What's Raheem Morris doing?
Yeah, no, I
mean, what? Because the path is different. I think we have to be more open to the path change.
I think he would be a great head coach. I think his personality is better suited for college than it is for the NFL. However, that being said, with the stars aligned, I think, you know, the problem you run into is, does he keep it too close? In other words, hey, I'll come here only if you attempt to trade for my son. And so, therefore, now it becomes an issue, and now you've got your son. So I think there's a lot of moving parts. I mean, listen, look at the mess that the Lakers are having, right? Sure. When LeBron said, hey, I want my son part of this team, and there are people in the industry laughing at it. So, you know, I think there's a lot of things happening. He's foolish not to reach out to Deion. and see if it's real. And if it is real, move forward. I would move, if I'm going after Deion, I move pretty quickly. The numbers are what they are, right? The buyout is what it is. Deion, what's it going to take? And then you move forward. Is he going to interview other candidates? And again, is Deion the most viable candidate because he understands how Jerry Jones works.
He understands the city, the culture.
Right? Correct. He understands the makeup of the family. And so it's not as attractive as it used to be because of those issues.
Right.
So does he make it more palatable? Does he make it a bigger PR stand and get everybody excited? But excitement only lasts so long. In the NFL, you got to win games.
So let me go over this. So NFL Rookie Watch had this, and this is a big layered situation with the Cowboys. The handful of NFL execs and scouts reportedly believe Jerry Jones would be open to taking on the $104 million dead cap hit in order to trade Dak Prescott and then try to secure Shedeur Sanders with Deion, as we just talked about, the father-son. There are a lot of moving parts in that, and it would be a lot to pull off. But many scouts believe Jerry's extremely interested in not only Deion, but Shedeur as a prospect and having the two together. The question now is, would Dak allow himself to be traded? Because, again, he has the ability to say no. Correct. Would the teams at the top of the draft want to take on Dak, whatever the money exchange would be at that point? Again, a lot of moving parts, but it's really interesting.
Yeah, and I don't think you have to get rid of Dak unless you're trading, obviously, and that's the trade bait, and he's willing to agree to that, if you want to get Sanders. Because, again, they can do what they've done here in Atlanta. You spend money, you have money invested in a starting quarterback, you have a young guy that eventually you're going to move and move forward with. And I'm sure we'll talk about Kirk Cousins and what's going on there and the Falcons. But, I think you could do both. But, again, it's not like college where people get excited and it's like that counts for something. In the NFL, it is about winning games, making the playoffs, playing this late into the season. And they haven't been able to do it with Dak. Can they do it with Dak and Deion? I don't know. Can they do it with Dak, Deion, and Shedeur? I don't know. But it does create excitement. It allows us to talk about it. But if Jerry Jones wants to make it happen, and Deion is willing to make it happen, it will happen.
Okay, let me ask you the other part of this story. And again, from NFL Rookie Watch, Shedeur Sanders is rumored and reportedly now are being shoved together like a sandwich to not be permitted to play for the Jets and or the Browns if he was drafted. Now, Deion was on a talk show yesterday, was asked specifically, would you advise your son not to go somewhere to go somewhere? He said, I wouldn't say that. But he says, I know exactly what goes on behind the curtain. I know what's happening with these organizations. That we had a Eli Manning situation years ago with Archie Manning that you're not going to San Diego, and that pushed the trade to the Giants. Can you see Deion being involved so much if he doesn't want Shedeur going to one of those teams?
Yeah, and that's the rub, right? And Andrew Brandt can talk about this when he's dealt with this. It's how much do they really buy into this? And do you want the headache if you really want the player, but you're already dealing with these issues? So he's going to be able to pick and choose where he wants, but, be careful what you hope for, because you end up with the team that you want and it doesn't work out, there's mud on your face. So I think we're on slippery slopes. I know we're comparing it to Eli Manning, different era, different type of quarterback.
But does that matter if it's the same situation where it's dad who's been around the league and he's like, I'm looking out for my son's best interest? You're right. Different scenario, different era.
Salary caps were different. There was free negotiating back then. There was more money in New York than there was in other cities. Sure. Owner had deeper pockets.
But I don't feel like this is money with Deion. I feel like I don't want my son going to a place like New York where the Jets have butchered quarterbacks and the Browns who have done the same. I think it's best intention of I want him in the best place to try to thrive.
Here's the problem. If you're a top 5 pick, chances are you're going to a really bad team.
Right.
So you have to understand that, we talk about it with our clients all the time. You get drafted late first round. Yeah, I thought I'd go higher, but now you're on a Super Bowl contending team. The excitement, the fun, the winning is part of it. That, yeah, you're making a little bit less money, but you know what? You're enjoying your career. So, yeah, do you want to go to New York? There's upside, right? You're in the number 1 market there is maybe in the world. If you do turn the franchise around, you're the face of the NFL. You go to Cleveland. Yes, Cleveland gets a knock of it's not the iconic city for sports, and you deal with all that. So you're weighing that. But again, Dallas is America's team, but they haven't won. No. They're not even the second or third best team in their division right now. I mean, they are fighting an uphill battle in Dallas, and so be careful what you wish for. If you try to work the draft too much, I think more times than not, it hits you in the face.
All right, one more quick story here, and this is an offshoot from Dion in Colorado. University of Colorado has now become the latest Power 4 university to cut ties with its official NIL collective. We have athletic departments preparing to deal with the impact of this House versus the NCAA settlement, which, by the way, will allow schools to pay athletes up to $22 million annually through what we're going to see in revenue sharing, similar to some things we've seen in professional sports. We've talked a lot about NIL and where this is going. Does this seem to be kind of a harbinger, a sign of things to come, that teams are doing more of this, cutting ties with the collective, is going to bring it in-house and try to have more control over it?
I can tell you firsthand. I've been dealing with this with representing a few athletes going through this, and the revenue share is real, right? There's a big number that these teams are going to have, especially these Power 4 teams. That's going to take place, assuming everything goes well with the settlement, in July. So the way the deals are currently working is you're signing an NIL deal for the first 6 months of this calendar year, and then it will convert whatever that money is into the revenue share model. I don't think people will ever completely cut ties with the collective, and here's why. It's additional revenue. It's additional funds that you have access to recruit players. So when you have a revenue share model and you're offering somebody X dollars, and now you have a bigger number because you can bring some NIL numbers into that package, why would you sever ties?
Yeah, you're just stacking it.
You're stacking it.
Sure.
So I don't understand what the rationale is. I don't think they're going to be going with that initially for most of the players, but I do think the elite players are still going to have ties to the NIL collective because of the additional money. And at the end of the day, it's all about the money.
Do you think, though, it's teams trying to regain control after they've lost some of the control of it?
I don't know what kind of control you have because, again, these contracts are annual contracts. Right. You can leave. You can enter the portal. So there's no job security. There's no assurance that that player is going to be there. And you're still going to have situations like a Carson Beck or a Quinn Evers who may end up not turning pro and going because they don't know where their pro future is. Why not make this $3-4 million extra and go somewhere else? So, again, I don't think it matters whether it's revenue share or a collective or a combination thereof. I think at the end of the day, it's going to be another way for these guys to get paid and having different resources to pay these players.
All right, we are going to talk about the situation in Washington, which I thought it was an interesting question about Jaden Daniels, who is taking the NFL by storm. I want to get Hadley's opinion later on. Could we ever see teams deciding to pay players early to try to get ahead of the exploding contracts? We'll do that. But Andrew Brandt will join us next, the former vice president of the Packers. He's been on both sides of the negotiating table, from the player to the team. We'll ask him about the Packers. We'll ask him about Kirk Cousins and the Falcons. We'll talk to him about Coach Prime, all of it as Deals and Deadlines continues. All right, as we continue with this episode of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley, I'm Matt. Let's welcome in the former vice president of the Green Bay Packers. The guy's been on both sides, I told you, of the negotiating table, once repping those players. Now he was speaking to the team, and now he's moved to the media, and he's a law professor and doing all this stuff. He is Andrew Brandt, kind enough to join us here on the program. Andrew, we appreciate the time. How are you?
I'm good. Good to be with you guys. Well, and yeah, I always say to people right now that I have a lot of jobs, so I don't have to have a real one.
I agree with that.
I love that. Yeah. Just to give you some background, Matt, and for everyone else listening, I have known Andrew as somebody that when I first got into the business in the early 90s, we competed against each other, and someone that was with a bigger firm and done a lot of things, so you kind of look up to him. And then, next thing you know, you wake up and he's negotiating against you with the Packers. So he was able to bring that context in. And now that he's in the media and a big law professor now, he's someone that people look at that kind of has a very vast knowledge of what goes on. And his insight is amazing about everything going on.
Now, Andrew, just so you know, he called you a traitor at one point from leaving the side of the players negotiating. So wait, tell me about that transition, though. Why did you make that transition? How apprehensive were you, or how excited were you to go from one side to the other side?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great question, and yes, I was called that I was going to the dark side many times when I made that transition. I have a unique
The dark
story.
side became the frozen tundra, too. It wasn't like
Exactly.
you got to move to Green Bay, so that's really the dark side. Go
I
ahead.
have a unique story that I've told several times that people still don't believe it, but at a month before I moved to Green Bay, I had the watershed client of my career where I was going to take off to a new level of being an agent. After 2 years of recruiting, I had signed first as a baseball player, but then as a Heisman Trophy winning top 5 NFL draft pick, Ricky Williams. I had him. And some guys started hanging around him, and I'm like, Rick, what's up? And he finally said, these guys work for Master P. And I'm like, who's Master P? He said he's a rapper. And I said, well, okay, what's going on? He said, I like the guy's getting into sports. I'm going to be his guy. I like him. I'm going to work with him. I said, what about me? And he said, I want you to work with him. I don't like your firm. I like you. I said, okay, I don't know about that. He said, well, just meet with him. So I meet with him, and it's like a whole episode with
at the club, right? Yeah, that's where you met at.
We met at the Brandt Hotel in San Diego, where Ricky's from. And I'm like, okay, well, I call my wife. I'm like, I think I'm going to go work for this Master P. And she says, who is Master P? I said, a rapper, etc. But as we're getting off the phone, she says, you know what? The Packers GM, Ron Wolf, has been calling you at the home, at our house. And I'm like, well, that's weird. So I call Ron Wolf back, and I say, listen, I can't talk about, I had Hasselbeck, was my only client, third-string quarterback. I said, I can't talk about Hasselbeck. I got Master P. I got Ricky Williams. He's like, yeah, I know. It was in the news. So I said, what's going on? He said, Mike Holmgren, our coach, just went to the Seattle Seahawks. I said, okay, I watch SportsCenter. I get it. Well, he took Reinfeldt. So Reinfeldt was the guy that ran the business operation of the Packers, did all the contracts. He went with Holmgren to Seattle. And I said, okay, sorry to hear it. I had no idea what he was going to say next. And he said, Andrew, how about, would you switch sides and come here? And I said, Green Bay? And he said, yeah. I said, listen, you deal with 100 agents. Why me? And he said, well, Hasselbeck loves you. You have a good way about you with people. You know your way around this stuff. And mainly, we want to get more agent-friendly. And what better way to hire an agent we like? And I said, let me come up there. So I leave Austin, Texas, and I go to Green Bay. And long story short, I asked the question, don't take offense to Ron and Bob Harlan. I said, don't take offense, but do I have to actually move here to do this job? And they said, no offense, but yes. And that started it. And you know what? You know this better than anyone, Hadley. My decision was about much more than obviously moving to a geographically undesirable place. It was about getting off the train of chasing these guys. Rick was going to fire me one day anyway, if not then, and a different life.
So you actually had to discuss with your wife this life-changing decision of Master P or Green Bay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, Master P living wherever we wanted to live, or Green Bay living in rural Wisconsin. And after 10 years of rural Wisconsin, I can talk about my Packer experiences, of course, but she got to pick the next stop.
Somewhere warmer, I assume, yeah.
She's born and raised literally a couple blocks where I sit now in Villanova, PA. And I wanted to do two things with my life, really. I wanted to do media and academia, and really the same thing with both, which is uncover, go behind the curtain, talk about the inner workings of sports, primarily football, in ways that weren't out there. And teach, obviously, but also TV, radio, podcasts, newsletters, whatever, just to sort of bring people behind the curtain. And it was hard at first. I left a high-prestige, high-paying job and started over, but obviously it's worked out in that last 12 years.
So let me ask you, Andrew, since we are in Atlanta, I'm curious what you found most interesting about the beginning and what looks like the end of the Kirk Cousins contract signing, losing the gig, maybe trading. What did you find most interesting about all of it?
Well, a big swing in free agency, the biggest swing of the year by any team last year, and it's just amazing how he continues to have a strong market. I say continued. I'm not sure about the future, but yeah, it was a massive deal. And basically I looked at it as, $90 million over 2, another 10. So they're committing $100 million for 2 years to have that security. And now, of course, we can look back and say, well, it's really $90 million over 1, and they're going to end up paying them this year, depending on what else they can get. The curious move, as everyone knows, was picking Penix 8th overall, and people compared it to our situation in Green Bay. But our guys Rodgers and Love were coming in behind a Hall of Famers who had been there for 15 years. Penix is coming in for a guy who just got there like him. So it was just a weird thing what they were trying to do. Now they'll turn it over, so he ended up sitting 1 year instead of everyone projecting it 2, and Cousins will face a very uncertain market. But basically, they were willing to commit $100 million to just get through these 2 years.
Yeah, and the uncertain market is where he's going to be playing, not where he's going to be making money-wise. I mean, that's already set in stone, and someone's going to get him at a true discount, and I think he's going to fall into a situation where he's going to agree to be traded to a team that, was willing to pay him the vet minimum, let the Falcons pay the lion's share, let him groom whoever they have that's young or that they draft, and maybe he revitalizes his playing career, sort of what Sam Darnold did, minus what happened the other night, losing, but is definitely a viable starter in the NFL that now has a true market, and whether he stays in Minnesota or goes elsewhere, he's going to have a market.
Well, that's what I was going to ask, Andrew. What do you think Kirk's market might be? I know, if Hadley's right, like at the most it would be $27 million if somebody was going to trade for him. Falcons could release him, right? He can decide he can be released. You can get him for a vet minimum. Or what kind of trade comp could you even get for the guy?
I don't know. I don't think it's much. I mean, I don't. We can talk about Darnold, who's kind of the new Cousins, in a better spot. I just don't see a team bringing in Kirk Cousins to be a starter anymore. That was it. So the Atlanta job a year ago, that was the last bringing him in to be the starter. Now you bring him in to be a high-paid backup that you feel comfortable if your young starter has to miss time. I just think that's where he is in his career. And just a quick transition, I think the overreaction to Darnold is really what I don't like about media, because 2 weeks ago he's going to get $50 million a year.
Right.
Today he's going to get $2 million a year. Obviously, it's going to be somewhere in between, and I wouldn't put past the Vikings franchising him for $40 million. It sounds like a lot of money, but it's another bridge to their rookie who's been hurt, and you can't expect him to come in and perform with a high-ranking team right away. So I like Darnold's market if they let him out there. I don't think they will, because this is the thing that football has that no other sport does with the tag. And I think the overreaction to Darnold has been just recency bias at its worst.
Yeah, and I think it's a smart move by Minnesota to keep him, right? Because you don't know what JJ can do, and you haven't seen him yet. And, if he is the future, you have Sam for 2025 season, and then JJ becomes a starter in 26. So I think you're in a good position. And, and I actually think, Atlanta is maybe making the mistake on creating this bad PR with Kirk Cousins, because all you're doing is flipping the guys, and you already budgeted for both of them, Penix and Kirk Cousins, and why not keep it status quo? And if something happens to Penix, you do have a seasoned vet who's won big games, and the goal is to get to the playoffs and win. And could they do it with Penix, and with Penix with a backup that is new to the system that isn't successful? I don't know. So again, for budgeting purposes, if you're not going to get true draft compensation, which they're not.
You think they keep him on the roster and pay the $10 million?
I would.
To pay see, that's the one thing. Again, I don't know if $10 million matters or not, but there's a $10 million waiting on him March 16th if he's on the roster.
Yeah. No, I just think.
I mean, I like that thought, because you just think about Arthur Blank sitting down with Fontenot and these guys a year ago. There's got to be the question, what if he's shot after a year?
Right.
And then bring it, 2 months later, drafting a top 8 pick. There's got to be the feeling like, hey, we spent $100, but we're gonna pay it. We understand. So I like the idea, rather than pick a number, 4th round draft pick or 3rd round draft pick, and the cap hit of trading him. I think you make a good point there.
Yeah. Let me ask you, Andrew, a couple of things. We were talking about Deion Sanders a little bit earlier, the Dallas stuff. Yeah. Jerry talking to Deion. Do you think it's just smoke, or do you think there's something more there?
Well, I think the media, whatever both of them told Adam Schefter, is just too loose. So that does give him cover if he goes there. I just don't see it. I just don't. I mean, I know it's great media, great content if he would go there, and I don't think the reason he doesn't go is sharing a spotlight with Jerry Jones. I think that's overrated. believe him when he says he's committed to Boulder. I'm not going to go in the what's behind the words game. I think he is, and I think he made a comment that I thought was telling earlier this offseason about now I can just be a coach and not a dad. And I think he wants to do that.
Yeah, well, the question is, what kind of coach is he really, right? That's, when you don't have the quarterback that you've raised since birth and developed and learned your system and played with you. People forget that, he got a couple of, if you want to call it JUCO years, playing at a small school with less limelight, but learning the system, learning college sports, and that prepared him for what was in front of him at Colorado. Plus, he had Travis Hunter. So you're talking about, we'll find out what kind of coach he really is, whether he stays at Colorado or goes somewhere else. Andrew, let me ask you this question. People are talking about the head coaching carousel, but there's also the general manager carousel. And obviously you've gone through that, you've seen it. And what I'm surprised, not talking about any particular candidate for any particular team, is something that you brought up earlier, and I've said it for years, on why teams haven't looked toward the agent community, people that have dealt with players and negotiated these contracts, and then that agent or now the general manager hires the right personnel people with regard to finding the right players. But the relationship and understanding the way agents think, you would think that would parlay into becoming a good general manager. You see it in other sports. We've seen it in football. We've seen it in basketball, and we've seen it in baseball, and have had success in it. But we've never really seen it on the NFL side. Do you think there's a reason for it?
Well, I will say this. I was, I think, second. Maybe I was third. I know Bruce Allen, of course, going from agent side to team side. Then me, Cliff Stein in Chicago, my colleague in the NFC North, and he's just left after 20-something years. Probably others we're not thinking of. But, yeah, it has not been a trend. And I can only speak to myself. It was completely seamless. And, yeah, I had to get used to Green Bay and get used to managing a cap. But the negotiations part was seamless. I'm just on the other side. And the feeling of trust with players was very helpful. Because even players coming to me and saying, hey, Andrew, you're a former agent. I trust you. And even negotiating with me without an agent. So I totally agree. I just think, I don't know, Hadley, we're just stuck on this model, which I don't understand, even having lived it in Green Bay, which is your GM should be a scout. I don't get that. Your GM, to me, should be a leader who can hire a chief scout. Scouts are not trained to lead. Scouts are trained to scout.
Right.
So I would even hire someone from pick a company, Google or whatever, and let them coordinate coaching, cap management, and scouting, and hire chief officers of those. That would be my thought.
Let me ask you before we let you go, Andrew, because I know you've talked about it publicly, especially during the coaching cycle. How do you think the Rooney Rule is being evaluated today? How do you look at it? Is it as effective as we want? And I know the answer is probably no, but what do we do to get there?
Yeah, I just talked about on my podcast about the Patriots. Mike Vrabel may be the perfect coach, may be the guy that's going to lead them to the promised land. But let's be serious. That was not a serious consideration of the Rooney Rule. They did interview a couple of minority candidates, Pep Hamilton and Byron Leftwich, who, by the way, got no interviews elsewhere. The tipping off was Aaron Glenn, much in demand. Aaron Glenn says, no way. He didn't interview. He knew the game. He knew. He told us all by his actions that Vrabel was getting it. So listen, I'm sound critical of the Patriots, and the rule, but I don't know how you solve it. I just don't. I don't know how you solve when an owner wants a guy hell or high water. And
by the way, there's nothing, let's be real about it. The owners are the owners, right? I mean, it's the franchise. They've spent the money, and if they have their eye set on somebody for whatever reason, why shouldn't they have that ability to hire who they want?
Yeah, I mean, the other side of it, I remember talking to Bill Polian, and he's like, the moment that Tony Dungy got fired in Tampa, I knew 3 minutes later he was going to be our coach. Now, that's a different ethnicity, but he said, no one white, black, green was going to change that. So that was the same thing on the other side. So I guess, how do you fix it? And without having sham interviews.
Right.
So I'm critical, but I don't know the answer.
Andrew, we appreciate your time. Always great to catch up. Andrew's a wonderful follow, by the way, on social media. His podcast is a great listen to, too, covering a lot of the items, sports business, NFL, and all that kind of interesting stuff that we're trying to give you here. We appreciate you spending some time with us.
Always a pleasure, guys.
All right, Andrew, thank you.
There he is, the former vice president of the Packers. Again, was on both sides, negotiating for players as an agent, then moving over to the team side. We appreciate him joining us. All right, coming up, I want to pick Hadley's brain about an NFL kind of contract decision that could look like the Braves, the way they've kind of handled some of their young players. We'll talk about that and more as Deals and Deadlines continues. All right, as we continue this episode of Deals and Deadlines with Hadley, I'm Matt, and we have something I want to chew on here, Mr. Hadley. So we're watching these rookie quarterbacks who are, they're thrown right into the fire, and some, it happens, they just look like the real deal, and Jaden Daniels in Washington has looked like that from the jump. The talent, the athleticism, the poise, all of it.
C.J. Stroud last year. Look
C.J. Stroud
now.
the same.
So it happens.
Yeah. So here's my question to you, and I don't understand the way the contract structure of this stuff works in the CBA, so you can help me. We live in Atlanta, so we watch the Braves, who have been notorious for signing their young talent before they hit the open market, right? And in baseball, there's arbitration, so you try to buy them out of that. And, on the back end, hopefully you save some money. Is there anything that says in the NFL, if Washington went to Jaden this offseason and said, listen, we want to rip up the rookie contract. We want to give you a 7-year deal. We want to guarantee this much money. And they know the way the quarterback market explodes every year. They want to stay ahead of what's going to happen in 4 or 5 years. Is that allowed? Would Jaden agree to it? Could something take...
Not allowed.
Okay.
So the way the CBA is drafted is any drafted player, and Jaden and CJ are 2 drafted players, obviously, everyone must sign a 4-year deal. No ifs, ands, or buts. First rounders have a 5th-year option that has to be exercised after the 3rd year, and that becomes guaranteed. It's based upon where you're drafted, how much you've played, all these different factors come into that set number. But under no circumstance can you renegotiate until you're done with your 3rd year in the league. So are teams being proactive? Yes. We have clients of ours that have been approached. We have one now that we hope is going to be approached, just finishing up his 3rd year, is a star player. And you hope that they look at it just like you're saying and say, all right, we want to pay this guy. He's underpaid as a starter. And, it would be discounted to some degree, but not really. But it enables the team for salary cap purposes. They don't have to worry about the franchise tag the following year. There's a lot of moving parts that come into play in determining what works best. The problem you run into is when you have a franchise quarterback, yes, you can isolate that person and say, all right, we're going to pay that person early. But when you have a star running back, a star offensive tackle, a star cornerback, and you don't do it with them,
right,
you create a problem.
Sure.
And so Atlanta Braves, get back to that, basically did it with all of their young players so that they think are part of the future. So they didn't pick and choose other than Max Fried. Mm-hmm. Here's a guy they could have done that with, but didn't value him enough.
Or maybe they went to him and he turned it down.
Correct.
Yeah.
Who knows? Same thing with Dansby Swanson.
Sure.
When he was with the Braves. Did they go to him and say, hey, we're willing to pay you this? And Dansby's like, well, I think my market's higher. Then go. Because we don't value you at the same level someone else may. But I think that teams that are smart, finding players from other teams is great to fill holes. But to build a base of a roster, whether it's football, baseball, basketball, you do it from within. And if there's players you like, they're good for the locker room, they're great around the coaches, they fit the scheme, don't be foolish and not pay them early. And I'll be able to share it with you all in the next couple of months in dealing with a similar player that should be paid and should be paid handsomely. The question is, will the team do it? We'll find out. They control it because you're under contract still.
Yeah. All right, I want to read you a tweet. I want to get your opinion on this. This is from Pro Football Talk, Mike Florio, who writes, with upwards of 40 million people who will be tuning in to watch the Commanders and Lions on Saturday night, Fox has a clear obligation to let the full audience know that Tom Brady, who will be in the booth, has a chunk of the Raiders now as an owner of the team. And it sounds like Tom is becoming more sort of important in the future of the franchise. They've interviewed both the Lions coordinators already, Ben Johnson and Aaron Glenn. He'll be calling the game. At some point, I know the league has to keep a close eye on this. It feels like it's a conflict of interest. it feels like, and they tried to have Tom not talk about teams and do this and that. Hadley, if I'm guessing, I think this is a one and done, and Tom's going to be more running things for the Raiders than in the booth.
I don't know, but again, when you say conflict of interest, what real conflict of interest is there?
I would say it this way. For a guy in the booth who could be hiring one of these guys, there are certain things that you could say that could influence how people think about them, how you think about what you say about them. It's a very slippery slope. There's a reason baseball took Jessica Mendoza out of the booth, because she was a part owner. Was it the Mets or whoever she had a small percentage in, because they did not like the messaging from somebody who's an owner of a team talking about either other teams, other players, or in this case, potential head coaches that they might hire when you're on a broadcast and supposed to be impartial.
No disrespect to Jessica Mendoza. I'm a big fan. She's not Tom Brady.
Agreed.
Right? So I think Tom is a professional. I think he knows what he can and cannot say. Will it be perfect? Probably not. But at the end of the day, I think that this is a game. It's not a big deal in the framework. It's great for the coverage. Look, we're talking about it. So not only are we talking about a great game that the winner goes to the NFC Championship, but we're talking about Tom Brady. Does he take a bigger role with the Raiders? I'm not so sure yet. I mean, obviously we'll see what he does this offseason in their new hiring and how much involved he's going to be in. But I think Tom likes being in front of the camera, even though he's a broadcaster. And I think taking that away, first of all, it's a pretty paycheck.
It is. By the way, let me add this, and I hate to be so critical. He's not good at it.
No. But again, first year doing it.
You're
right?
not wrong.
So let's give him.
Here's the problem. We're putting Tom Brady into the number one broadcast booth.
Are you not going to watch it?
Oh, I don't care who's in the booth.
Right. So
but what I'm saying is I am distracted by how much he talks.
I know.
Like, I am blown away about how bad he is at this job. For a guy who, he knows football. Nobody's either coaching him or he's not taking the coaching, or I don't know what happens. Again, is this a big deal? No. But you put a guy for reasons of his fame into the number one spot in the booth, and then you realize the guy's just not good at it. Yeah. It's not his fault. He's just not good at it.
Yeah, and I don't like his pitch.
Yeah.
But you know what? I think you got to give him the benefit of the doubt. He is bringing some knowledge.
Sure.
And again, he is Tom Brady. He is Michael Jordan. He's at a level that, takes, the coverage to a different place. So, I think we got to give Tom some leeway. Let's see if this becomes something. Is Tom looking at this long-term career-wise? I don't know. Tom can do whatever he wants to do. And I think that's why he's dabbling in this ownership and involvement with the Raiders to kind of see what happens next. And I think he'll be involved in all these different things. And then if there's something that really gravitates toward him, that, hey, this is my calling, this is what I want to do, I think he'll continue it. But I think entertainment and media is part of his short and long-term goals. So I think being involved in the broadcasting is always going to be part of what he does. Shame on Fox for making him number one, but you know what? We're talking about it, and he's still, I think there's better, but they're not Tom Brady.
Yeah. The fame matters. Like Hadley's fame, it matters.
Yeah, sure.
All right, that's going to do it for us for this episode. I remind you, you can subscribe to the podcast anywhere you get your favorite podcast. It'll be waiting for you when it drops each and every Friday. Also available on the 680 The Fan YouTube channel. I'd be remiss if I didn't thank our technical director, Amanda Schwartz, who kept the program just humming right along. Thanks to you guys for joining us. We'll talk to you next week on Deals and Deadlines.